When telling the story of the spread of fentanyl and meth on the streets of the United States over the last several years, one thing I like to do is reach out to people that normally you would not consider expert in these areas, yet have lived with it in ways that makes them an expert. On a trip to San Francisco, I met one such fellow, Adam Mesnick. Adam Mesnick is a deli owner in the South of Market area. He moved into the South of Market area just before the area is becoming an open air drug use zone. Watching this decay turned him into a gadfly of sorts. He became very critical of politicians in the area, very active on Twitter, where he published many photographs of life on the streets, of people essentially in the process of dying on the streets around his deli. I had an opportunity to speak with Adam. Very happy that I did. It was a fascinating conversation. I started out by asking him what South of Market was known for when he moved in 2009.
South of Market really was the tech capital of the universe, as far as I knew. Some of the biggest and brightest were born here. You have Square and Uber, Airbnb, Twitter, obviously, now X, and the companies that were opening and establishing themselves in this territory, this turf, were just, really powerful companies, with big ideas, great products, good people. I've seen it transform and change. So what it is now is I'm looking outside right now, and there's very few businesses, there's very few new anything. If it is new, it's very difficult to sustain. The life that I've had and the education that I've had on the drugs, on mental illness, really by accident, having a business down here. I think I told you the first time we spoke, I have a PhD in South of Market drugology, and it really, my experiences were refuted and belittled and boycotted and blackballed. I would say that the park across the street from my deli, which is called Victoria Manilows Park, I would say that was a microcosm of what San Francisco became. There was prostitution in the bathroom, there was drug dealing, there was even the occasional tent. In 2013 into 14, I stopped drinking. And that brought a huge amount of awareness. But back before that, I went and I went to the Occupy movement. I saw the Occupy tents, and at that point in time, I started to pay attention to kind of the comings and goings of the Coalition of Homelessness and some of the other large organizations, kind of, what the solutions were. Why are there so many people on the streets? And what I saw at the Occupy was no different than today's protests. You had these kind of homelessness industrial complex groups that were anti-capitalism, anti-greed, the same people that are anti-everything now, but these people were looking for solutions for the people on the streets, and tents became an explosion. The explosion of tents was probably one of the biggest destroyers of San Francisco's communities. It was absolutely astonishing. I have documentation of just corner after corner, block after block of just tent encampment. And what the Occupy movement seemed to do was it gave people a green light to be able to live in a tent. And these anti-capitalism groups pushed the tents. None of them lived in the tents. The people who occupied the tents at Occupy were drug addicts, but they propped up the idea of occupying space, and occupying space happened, and the tent movement followed. You know, the initial locations were probably the hot spots that have been the hot spots for all these years, and it just has been nothing but hotspot, rinse, clean it up, do a sweep or whatever. They had different terminology for it. And you know, the reality is that the backlash for clearing them, and the backlash was far more intense than the push to get any of these people in housing.
Really? So you felt that there was this wanting to protect their their ability to live in a tent on the street, on the sidewalk.
Right. It was a kind of a, it's always been my opinion that people who work in the homeless complex over there, you know, the Coalition of Homelessness, it's always been a big fuck you to the city, right? I mean, they're suing the city, there's injunctions, there's all sorts of layers of problems that happen because they oppose whatever conditions are offered, or whatever solution can be provided. The tents became the safest, best option. And then by 2020 with COVID, I mean, it was just absolutely a full explosion of tents.
And what I've always thought is interesting is how a lot of these things kind of blend together like tributaries to a river. You know, and it seems to me like what you're saying is just as people were getting really approval to live in tents on the street, and the tents were expanding, the methamphetamine as I know for a fact, was hitting in levels of potency that it had never hit before.
I didn't understand really the drug use and what they were using until probably 2016 and 17. Once it was a different time. There wasn't as much public drug use, right? So there was addicts on the street, but somehow they found a way, if they were going to sell and do their dope wherever they were going to do their dope, it was far more concealed. The meth piece happened. A lot of these people, like it, they did the opioid day, and then they needed to stay up at night, or they smoked crack and then crystal to stay up at night. And the crystal, whatever the crystal was, and whatever the crystal is today, has created, I mean, they call them locally meth monsters. And I've been assaulted by a meth monster 3 times at my store through the years, right? There's only one political faction in power here. So there's only one group of people who have an opinion here. And if your opinion doesn't align with theirs, you are right-wing, white supremacist, Nazi. And that seems to be part of the playbook, right? So in lieu of helping the people on the streets, why not attack the guy who doesn't agree? I'm not quite sure how medical issues and medicine became so politicized, but it is. And the political ideology here is that harm reduction and housing first is the solution. And in my opinion, you can look at the metrics and they failed miserably. You know, the fentanyl rush is no different than the gold rush. And you have your winners and you have your losers. And the reality is that you have an entire group of people who are financially dependent on people revolving through the housing and back on the streets, back through the housing, back on the streets. The harm reduction groups have basically, in lieu of any recovery options, have dominated the conversations. And in that, there's a lot of financial gain. Again, the conversations that I've had with people, lots of questions. Are you housed or are you homeless? All of them will tell you they're homeless. But the people who make the decisions for them will tell you to call them unhoused because it feels better for them. It feels better for them. So I think what you have is you have a lot of groups who are financially gaining, but what they're doing is exactly what feels better for them. And the protections that they provide are simply enabling the people to continue to use on the sidewalk, to be intent. At one point, they enabled them to be intense on the sidewalk. I mean, across the street from my business, I mean, that I witnessed two people getting pulled out of tents by the medical examiner across the street from my business within the last like 3 or 4 years. That's crazy. You would think, okay, so two people died on the sidewalk across the street from this guy's business. All he does is complain about people doing fentanyl all over the place. Two people die. You would think that they would try to practice a different type of solution other than enabling them with harm reduction. And there's people will always say follow the money, and the money moved from safe needles, right, to Narcan. I mean, I sprayed myself. I sprayed a couple hundred Narcans myself. I mean, you're talking about like in 2022 and 2023, I couldn't really walk outside without somebody overdosing on the sidewalk. And again, you have groups of people that will explain that these people were evicted, they've fallen upon hard times, poverty, et cetera, racism, whatever the case may be, which is the coalition's view, versus people who are living in the reality and living actually in it. I mean, I don't know if I've ever really met more than one homeless person who's not a drug addict, right? So all of the population of people in south of Market that live on the street, I've always gauged it by their ability to keep shoes on their feet, right? I mean, a lot of these people don't have shoes. There should be a gauge. If you can't keep shoes on your feet, you should no longer be allowed to live outside. The initial surge of fentanyl probably wiped out all of the heroin addicts, would be my best guess. There was a period of time where it switched over here to fentanyl, probably like 2018 and 19. And again, the behaviors of the pro drug use groups and coalition of homelessness, and the ease of use to get general assistance, and really, a lot of what these groups have done, the coalition of homelessness, there's another one, Homeless Youth Alliance, is really, if you're a drug addict and you live outside, they help you navigate the system so you get all the benefits. So really, they're just gaming the system. And I think the one thing that, especially since COVID, one thing that's particularly interesting locally in San Francisco is you've seen just a major drop off in younger population. I think that San Francisco's ability to retain people has been tough. And I think that the only real population that's entered here has been the drug addicts. And I think that with such a tolerance, forgiveness for drug use, ease of use, they had the cheapest fentanyl on the planet was here. And I think that it's astonishing. The most expensive place in the entire world probably to live had the cheapest fentanyl that you could possibly find. And basically I've likened it to the gold rush. It was the fentanyl rush. And who made a bunch of money? Like the homeless industrial complex, and all of these businesses have no money left. I always thought that the harm reduction people probably could have moved into the recovery direction maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but simply doubled down on harm reduction. And again, I mean, there was a safe fentanyl consumption site located in San Francisco close to my deli, and I went in there as a non-user, right? And there were people smoking fentanyl off foil with straws in lawn chairs, supervised. And I'm not a rocket scientist, but I have always said, can a medical doctor tell me that doesn't and isn't employed by San Francisco's Department of Public Health? Would a medical doctor approve of this? What medical doctor would approve of this? And how do you even tolerate this? How do you allow it? And then on top of it, it's supervised, and you have actual government officials and their friends and the coalitions pushing for safe use, right? So instead of any protective measures, taking out the drug dealers or helping people recover or anything having to do with any of that, they're showing them how to safely smoke fentanyl, right? So they help them, enabled them with foil and straws. So after that, whatever period of time was, this was before COVID. This was before COVID. During COVID, it only got absolutely even nuttier. There was a sign that I saw at a hotel on 7th Street over here. It was a shelter-in-place hotel, and they did a play on words. It said, "Take small sips at the sick." Sips of fentanyl. So take small sips of fentanyl, use slowly so you don't overdose. I mean, I really, to me, looking back, it's fucking bananas, Sam, right? It's fucking bananas. It's not, it didn't make sense. And it did make sense to prevent AIDS and hepatitis and bloodborne disease. And
it sounds like what you're saying is they were trying to impose certain approaches that were adequate for another time.
They definitely, the drug changed and the technology stayed the same.
You think
Right.
fentanyl requires you, once you're addicted, the nature of fentanyl, the quick acting nature of fentanyl means you have to be using all day long, and that and the enormous supplies of the drug. um, it occurs to me that maybe this was part of why open air drug use became tolerated, because people just couldn't wait. Fentanyl was a kind of a demanding kind of mistress in a sense, and you just had to use it. And after a while, everybody was using it, and then there was no way to stop it.
In the years before fentanyl, and when it was crack or crystal, even heroin, if children were walking by, there would be some consciousness. There would be kids, and kids are coming. Something about fentanyl just removes all space and time.
Yes.
And it is absolutely what it does. It ravages people's souls. it ravages them. And I've never, I mean, like, the shelf life on a fentanyl addict has to be very, very low. And I mean, I've seen like people, like, they just are falling apart. There's so many obstacles for somebody to find recovery, and there's no sober housing. And I think that there was just a full tilt shift into everything harm reduction, and it didn't really work. It didn't really work. I think that it created kind of the mess that a lot of these communities have today, and it still goes on every day. I mean, some of these communities are absolutely wrecked. The fentanyl kind of corresponded with the tents, and with the permissiveness. Word finally caught on that you could come to San Francisco and do whatever the fuck you want and smoke all the fentanyl you want and steal from any store that you feel like and really do whatever you feel like. And you're protected there too, right? You got protections. There's people who will protect you and make sure that you don't go to jail and you're marginalized. And there's plenty of opportunity for forgiveness. And really, so you had tent permissiveness, you had the explosion of fentanyl, and then you had COVID, right?
I'm wondering if you have, when you first noticed the fentanyl fold, what they call it, the
Yeah.
people begin to fold at the waist.
I mean, I've documented people. I personally have a theory on it. And I mean, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but my theory you have to think about yoga, and you have to think about the forward fold in yoga, which is kind of a resting position, a comfortable position. Now, these people are living on the sidewalk, living outside for the most part. Let's assume that they live outside. They don't have couches, they don't have chairs. All they have is sidewalk. What happens over time, I think that the resting position, you remove yourself from space and time. You're just in a fentanyl zone. It's something different. It's not for public usage. It's not for consumption. It should not be smoked. Now, in that loss of space and time, the resting fold is the only kind of comfortable position that someone has. So over time, their back degenerates just like their bodies do, just like their brains do. And it's just a continual fold until you're completely slumped. Now, right now, with with the new push and the new administration, I think a lot of what is important and a lot of uh, what has happened, it's messaging, right? It's like back in the fentanyl rush in 2019, 2021. Hey, it's a free for all in San Francisco. Let's fucking go. People started to come. And just like that messaging spread, there will be a new message that it's not the best place to go anymore to do fentanyl. They're breaking up drug camps. They're disrupting the markets. Now, do these people serve any time? I don't know. That is a whole another problem in San Francisco, is the actual judicial system. Um, but my understanding would be, as a former drinker, if every time I drank somebody disrupted my fun, I would probably be like, I don't want to go there anymore. So I think that what you're going to see is a continued disruption, and what's left on the streets are just severely physically disabled people, and people that are just mentally unwell.
I understand that you have moved from South of Market after 15 years down there.
But yes, I moved to the Marina District, which, um, you know, it's a retreat for me, Sam, and I needed to really uh, think, reflect, and recover. I needed to recover. I feel like I'm really big into recovery, and not just from from substance, from alcohol, from environment. And I didn't want a PhD on south of market drug addiction, but I have one. Now, reflecting, I take my dog to a beautiful park called the Marina Green, and about as long as it's not raining, I sit down and stare at Alcatraz or the Golden Gate Bridge, and spend about an hour a day doing that. And it's helping me to, I guess, mend a broken heart, right?
Thank you so much,
A
Adam.
pleasure.
Really appreciate you taking the time. Best of luck as in your new place
Thank
and
you.
your old business.
Thank you very much.
That was Adam Mesnick, deli owner in San Francisco, on the Dreamland Podcast. What a conversation. Really enjoyed talking with him. Thank him. I want to thank him very much for taking the time. Please subscribe to my Dreamland newsletter at samquinones.substack.com and my YouTube channel, which is True Tales Video on YouTube. And I'll see you on the next one.